have Andrew Moore, who's here in person, and Najat. Can you hear and see us?
Yes, I can see you and I can hear you.
Lovely. I'm sorry that we're running a bit late. Najat, I wonder if you could introduce yourself and your organisation for us, please.
Sure. My name is Najat El-Hamri. I'm the Regional Director for the Middle East region in MAG, known as Mind Advisory Group. So MAG has been working across the Middle East region since 1992, currently delivering programs in Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine. For those who don't know MAG, we are a humanitarian organization. We are addressing the cause and the consequences of conflict across 45 countries across the globe. We enable the communities to build their future, their lives after conflict, and we work extremely closely with in partnerships with national authorities to promote sustainable development.
Very much. That's a great introduction. This committee has always been a fan of both MAG and HALO, and it's a constant source of irritation that you don't get more funding and support, because literally, unless you go in and clear these spaces, there is no future for a lot of these communities. So thank you, and thank you for all the risks that your people take. Andrew, I wonder if you could introduce yourself and HALO.
Thank you. I'm Andrew Moore from the HALO Trust. I'm the Regional Director for the Middle East, North Africa and Afghanistan, and our programmes in the region comprise Libya, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, the West Bank, Gaza, and Afghanistan. We essentially conduct broadly the same activities as MAG, and thank you for your kind comments, Chair, on the work of both organisations. We are combined British centres of excellence and arms of British soft power, as well as humanitarian and developmental assistance. And more than 60% of the world's anti-personnel mines that were cleared last year were cleared by HALO and MAG.
That's great.
Wow.
Very good.
Tracy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for joining us. Can I ask you both, what are the main challenges for humanitarian organisations in delivering humanitarian assistance in Syria? And can I come to Najat first, please?
All right.
You didn't hear me. Maybe Andrew, maybe I could start. I was just asking what the main challenges for humanitarian organisations in delivering humanitarian assistance in Syria are. I don't think Najat can hear me.
Let's go to Andrew.
I'll come to you,
Happy to go first. I think first of all that we face a huge challenge with both landmine clearance and unexploded ordnance in towns and cities as well. The scale is enormous. And we see in HALO that you heard from the Minister the desire and the capabilities within the Syrian government, and they need to be built over time and should take over. And we see ourselves as a surge capacity to enable people to safely return to their homes. We need to remember that there are 7 million people internally displaced in Syria as well as externally displaced. And to rebuild, to farm the land, and for infrastructure to be rebuilt again, schools and hospitals. And the principal challenges that we face are just not enough money. There's just not enough money at the moment, and we all know the reasons for that. Western budgets are constrained. I think there's another constraint, which is the funding has not allowed that we have received has not necessarily allowed us to act strategically. There's lots of money coming through pooled funds. It's very hard to get a strategic sense of the landmine and explosive problem in Syria at the moment, and those funds tend to offer short-term funding in 6-month or 1-year cycles at the most. So we can't really plan, and the mine action organisations in Syria have distributed themselves quite well. We have regional responsibility de facto under the government, and we know what the challenge is, but we just don't have the means to implement that in a systematic way. So that I would say is the biggest challenge. You asked the Minister earlier about import restrictions. The impact of those sanctions, even though they've now gone, still lingers in many respects.
In what way?
So for example, we've recently had an issue with delays in shipping metal detectors from an Australian manufacturer, while the manufacturer sought explicit reassurance from the Australian government that they were permitted to do so. We have a container of drones, vital for surveying minefields and doing so as quickly as possible. from the UK, delayed not because of the restrictions, but because of the due diligence of the shipping agent and the company doing the shipping. They're still uncertain of the environment, and there are many more examples of this. And of course, we're not just constrained by UK sanctions; we're constrained by the sanctions that are imposed across the world.
Thank you, Janet. You want to?
Andrew, you've said that the funding has not allowed you to act strategically, and then you've mentioned the 6 months or the year's funding. Could you just say what sort of like funding would enable you to work strategically, and what that strategic looks like?
I think the other thing, often when we receive money from pooled funds, it is targeted and directed as well. So we have to fulfil specific tasks, and it would be ideal if we had arrangements with donors, even if it's 1 year's funding, but ideally multiple years funding, that we can talk to those donors jointly about where the priorities lie, so that we can then build a project together and target that funding in terms with our assessment of the issues in the areas in which we're working. So that would be optimal. I should also say that we are working with other organisations. You often hear talk of the triple nexus. It's quite hard to achieve for mine action organisations, because often organisations in other sectors don't want to share their resources, if you like, but we are essential to agricultural projects, to health projects, to rehabilitation of schools, and so we have started partnerships with UNDP. We're talking to UNICEF. They've recognised that the rehabilitation of schools needs explosive ordnance disposal specialists to enable it. We've devised a project, not funded as yet, with UNFAO, and so these projects do help, but it is funding that we can guide donors with as well, in terms of how it's targeted and what the needs are.
And are you able to talk to those funders and to say what more could be achieved, having that oversight and that strategic approach?
We do, but they face competing priorities.
Jack, are you able to hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry, I don't know what happened right at the beginning.
Don't worry, it just happens. We'll direct the next question to you, please.
Thank you. I'm glad. Can you hear us okay? Can you hear me as well, Nadia?
Yes.
That's great. Thank
Yes.
you. What impacts have escalating regional tensions had on the ability of humanitarian actors to deliver aid? I think Andrew just touched on there the fact that shipping of equipment is problematic, but I don't know if that's due to the current escalation or if that's just a general problem.
I think regionally we have seen, as Andrew mentioned, sanctions have been an issue across a lot of humanitarian organizations. So shipping items, equipment, detectors, as you know, we are working with dual-use items. So that's been a major challenge for us to be able to implement our work on the ground. But just to look into the regional escalations at the moment, we have seen, as Dr. Ahmed mentioned earlier, a large displacement, refugees going into Syria, trying to seek refuge as well, trying to look for safety, more than 100,000 people. And obviously, as you know, they don't know the danger they are faced when they go in Syria due to the contamination that the country is faced at the moment. So that's what we have been facing at the moment to be able to operate effectively. Security has been a major constraint as well. As you know, in Northeast Syria, there have been recently some escalations, again, displacement between Northeast Syria, and then you have seen also in Aleppo. So to manage those security constraints, sometimes we had to suspend our operations as well, because we couldn't operate effectively until we are able to operate safely. So that's the challenge we have been faced with at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. And Andrew, is there anything you would like to add to the same question?
No, I think I would just absolutely echo Najat's points.
Thank you.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Chair. I should just place on the record that obviously HALO are based in my constituency near Thornhill, and we're very supportive in the wider community of their activities. Andrew, can you describe the challenges that contamination and guns and ammunition stockpiles are presenting for rebuilding and recovery efforts in Syria?
Yeah, I think it's a simplification, but I'd characterise two broad issues in Syria. You have landmines, and by that I also include, they're not across the country, but they are in certain areas, improvised explosive devices used like landmines. and then you have the problem of unexploded ordnance. And they're similar, but they're distinct. So there are minefields across the countries and IED belts, but in particular, there is huge contamination on the former front lines in the northwest of the country, where we're seeing particular concentration of accidents as farmers are trying to cultivate their land. And those mines were laid by the forces of the Assad regime as they faced in trench lines and bund lines Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and its allies. The scale is enormous. Just in terms of a broad estimate of the area we need to survey, it's around 400 square kilometres just in the northwest. So that is a huge task in itself, and that's why I mentioned we're using drones. We're looking to use artificial intelligence to help refine the survey before we actually put boots on the ground and to further target. So that allows people first to know where they can work safely and where they can cultivate their land, but also where they can't, and to start assessing the clearance problem. The second issue is unexploded ordnance. Now, that exists across the country as well. So we're talking from hand grenades to artillery rounds, mortars, to bombs that haven't exploded as intended. And they're particularly devastating in towns, villages and cities. Again, a bit of a concentration on the former front lines. You see all the towns and cities there were flattened, the population's completely evacuated. But you also see it in the suburbs of Damascus, in central Aleppo, the suburbs of Homs, Hama, in Dara. And that's a problem of needing explosive specialists to deal with explosive ordnance as it's found quickly, so that individuals don't take matters into their own hands and risk injury or death, and also so that reconstruction isn't held up, so that wider efforts. So those are broadly the two challenges.
And what's the scale of the casualties then that you're seeing, and who you mentioned farmers, but I mean other places children have been particularly badly affected by such incidents?
So the first thing I'll say is there's not a complete picture on reporting, so we don't know accurately. There's huge under-reporting, we believe. And anecdotal information captured by MAG would suggest very strongly that the figures that we have are on the low side. But we do know that since the fall of the Assad regime, at least 1,900 people have been killed or injured by landmines. 40% of those are children. So it's a huge problem, and this is ongoing. It continues. It is the minister described the level of the tragedy, and as more people return and move, we'll just see this continue. We really need the means to start addressing this problem at the scale required urgently.
Najat, do you want to add anything on each of those issues?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as Andrew mentioned, I mean, he summarized it quite well. It's true, the casualty rate is quite high. And then if you look at Syria specifically, I mean, that represents in 2024, 30% of the total casualty across 51 states by the landmine monitor. That is really a huge number. And as of today, UNMAS has estimated that 15 million people are at risk of exploded ordnances. So the rate, again, as Andrew mentioned, we need to do those surveys. It's kind of difficult at this moment in time to really say what is the contamination at the moment. We know in Northeast Syria, because we were there, we had a good coordination mechanism. But as of now, obviously, with the new escalation, that is adding into the existing contamination. So that it needs time, it needs coordination for us to be able to really develop those baseline, to understand what is the scale of contamination. All we have is those casualty rate, and you know, as I said, they keep increasing day after day. In many parts of the country, actually across the whole country.
Brian, then David.
Yeah, just a question for both of you, really. Apart from yourselves as MAG and as the Halo Trust, who else is involved in dealing with demining and this unexploded ordnance? Is that part of the Syrian military's job? I mean, what's the split in terms of that?
Can I? Yeah, I can, and then you can complement. So at the moment, we are quite a few international humanitarian mine action organizations. We are a handful, I would say, of those organizations. we are, I mean, as Andrew mentioned, Halo, Mag, we are very much just specialized in the field of, doing clearance, while other operators, they are double-hatted. They are doing humanitarian mine action, but they're also doing other type of other activities like livelihood. So I would say Mag, Halo, we are just specialized in these areas in the country at the moment. We are very few operators operating on the ground. And as you can see, the map of Syria is very large, and who is operating and what and where, it makes it quite challenging. Just so you know, the needs are immense. We are getting endless requests by community members, by various stakeholders to be able to respond. And then obviously you have the UNMAS, United Nations Mine Action Services, who are trying to do some coordinations. And then you also have the National Mine Action Center, as explained earlier by Dr. Ahmed, who is a very new established entity, new established Mine Action Center, who is trying to coordinate. But the National Mine Action Center needs that support. We need to support them. We've been engaging BHALO, BMAG with them constantly to really understand what are their needs, how we can prioritize to support them, institutional support, also support them in terms of capacity development, as we have been doing in other parts of the globe, like where we work very, very closely with National Mine Action Center. We are here today. We don't know what's the future. We want to really develop those capacity locally to be able to let them run the show when at some point we will have to withdraw, because there is enough capacity. We are confident for them to be able to respond. But as of now, we are very, very few operators on the ground. And as Andrew mentioned, we are facing challenges bringing equipment, which at the moment MAG maybe has that unique advantage, I would say, because we're working Northeast Syria. We were able to bring in maybe a lot of equipment, which makes it potentially easy. But I know that in the long run, it's going to get even more challenging for many of us to bring in more equipment to be able to deliver. So the needs are big. The operators are small, the financial support is little. So you can see, like, this is where we are at the moment. Sorry, Andrew, if you want to jump in as well,
I would just say that Najat's right. The vast majority of this work is being done by the handful of international NGOs currently in Syria. There is a need to build that capacity and a desire to have it built in the National Mine Action Centre and through the Ministry of Disasters and Emergencies. But the worrying thing as well is that there are a lot of people filling this void as private individuals and setting themselves up to clear mines and dispose of explosives with no prior expertise. So that has the inevitable consequence of not only are they injuring and killing themselves, but often the people who are paying them to do this work are being killed or injured in the process, or the work is not being done thoroughly and accidents are happening subsequently. I don't necessarily blame people for doing that. They're filling a void and a need and a desperate desire to rebuild houses, rebuild homes, or get back onto land.
Remember from Mozambique, they were using rats, for example, intelligent rats to look for mines. Has there been any use of animals like that in this?
Not so far, no. Right. I think there's a huge amount of work to do on just quantifying the scale of the problem first.
David.
Just a very quick question, Najat. You said 30% of the casualty rate last year. I just wondered what that was in actual number term, just because I'm not aware of the overall casualty rate number.
So
roughly.
The casualty, sure. I mean, to give you the exact figure, as of now, since the fall of the regime, there've been 1,000 cases of accident, and that has resulted to what Andrew mentioned, to 1,900 casualties. So that's been people being killed or being injured. But if you look at, there is this landmine monitor, which is where all countries are tracking how they've been supporting in terms of landmines, report their progress around landmines clearance. So that's like across 51 states who are reporting back into this report. And that's when you look at the figure in that landmine monitor report in 2024, 30%. I don't have the exact number, but what we know is that 30% of the global total of casualties were reported in Syria specifically.
Thank you.
Andrew, what's the...
If I'll be honest, I don't know these days, but we always used to say it was a few pounds. They're very cheap to produce still, and the Assad regime did use them with abandon.
Thank you, Chair. So, Dr. Ahmed, the Minister for Emergency and Disaster Management, said that there are 1,555 camps in Syria, and then the UN estimates around 7.4 million people are internally displaced and 3.7 million Syrian refugees remain in neighbouring countries. And I was just wondering if you could give me some information on what the impact is of the presence of unexploded audiences, mines, unexploded bombs, on dealing with returning and internally displaced refugees. Do you want to go first, Najat?
Yeah, sure. So the risk is a little bit what Andrew mentioned at the beginning is people are not aware of the contamination. So some of them are quite desperate to go back. They've been, I think, more than no, actually it's more than that. Anyway, I don't want to give you random figures, but I know we've seen a lot of people trying to return to their home. They want to rebuild their life. They want to access their land. They want to really engage in agricultural activities. And then fortunately, they don't know the risk. So they try to themselves disarm bombs. And we know that this is where we have those casualties. So very often people returning to their homeland or even in their house, they are not aware of the risk of the contaminations. That's why we play that role, MAG, HALO, in terms of delivering those risk educations to the populations as well, for them to really understand if you come across those unexploded ordnances, just make sure you don't touch them. You need to report them, and and then the organization like MAG and others will come and clear them. So at the moment, it's a massive risk, obviously, for the population who's not aware, but also for those who are crossing now into Syria. So those who are returning to Syria, as Dr. Ahmed was saying, his brother, and we see a lot of people are returning in the country, again, not aware of. I remember when the fall of the regime, maybe a few months after, we met with UNHCR in Amman, and we were told that actually one of the reasons why people were threatened to go back to Syria, it's because of unexploded ordnances. They've heard that there are bombs being laid in front line, etc. So they are scared to come across those items. And honestly, you will see like there's a lot of clinic at the moment, people having legs amputated, and because they simply don't know the risk of those contaminations. So people movement is essential, really, really essential for us to give that message. As soon as people start moving, this is where we come in, EORE, leaflet, and also let's not forget international organization as well. We are working with other humanitarian organizations for them to also understand that there are contaminations. We also deliver those explosive ordnance risk education to them. So it's basically a full package. So you've got the populations, but you also have those who are delivering humanitarian aid, who are faced with those challenges with these contaminations. So it's really essential for the community to know the risk, and then for us to come and respond. But like I said, the demand has been huge, really huge. And I just wish we could just spread ourselves everywhere. If we had the funding, of course, we could have teams across the whole country. But at the moment, we have some limitation, as also Andrew mentioned. Over to you, Andrew, if you want to add anything.
Please, Andrew.
Yeah,
very briefly, please, Andrew.
Najat's described it generally very well. I think just specifically, if we think about the former front lines of the Northwest, everybody who's there now was displaced. And there are lots of people who haven't come back yet. And we see from early in the fall of the regime, or following the fall of the regime, we had families coming back. Think of a particular story where a father took his daughter to collect firewood from their field, and both were killed by a landmine. These have recurred. I think of the town of Sarakib, which was bang on the front line where we're clearing mines, and you can see exploded tractors everywhere where people have tried to cultivate. And just around this one village, I counted in the middle of last year, and there'll be more since, 7 or 8 tractors. Where people had exploded. So that is the impact, people being killed and injured as they return, but also it's a factor keeping people away, as Najat describes.
Is it a challenge to get the information to these families or people returning to make them aware of the dangers?
And that's just a question of scale. We can, but also I think we've got to remember that people who've been through hell have a somewhat different risk threshold to us. They're desperate to cultivate their land, and they will bear a risk that we perhaps wouldn't.
We did a report last year, I think it was, on the deaths of aid and humanitarian workers. And one of the things that came up was how difficult it was for funders to incorporate the costs of insurance and protection security for the people that they were commissioning to do the work. Is that something that you've come up against?
Not generally around the world. We have specific instances in some countries which are considered by our insurers to be particularly high risk, but HALO and MAG have long track records in this work, so we have a long track record with our insurers as well. So of course the costs are not low, but they're not prohibitive in most instances.
Thank you, and I should draw attention to my register of interest, having the opportunity to be up front with the HALO Trust in Sri Lanka. The government of Syria have set up this national mine action centre. Do you have a sense of how the FCDO could meaningfully engage and support them with that work?
Well, I think the Minister described it really well in terms of capacity development, helping with strategy and funding. And I wish some of those organisations tasked with supporting NMAC had similar clarity, to be honest. I think it's a small department right now. It's 7 staff. They are funded, but it's going to need to be much bigger just to coordinate the huge problem in and prioritise the huge problem in Syria. That's before you start building the Syrian capacity to actually do this work in due course. So I think, bearing in mind those 3 points, I would take the last of those, being a friend to Syria on the first 2, but also I think the only way, it's not for me to determine where the Syrian government asks for its funding priorities to be placed, but I think that National Mine Action Centre needs a lot more staff, and it needs to be much bigger, and I would hope donor governments would actually support it directly, as well as supporting implementing partners in doing the work that HALO and MAG do currently.
Is there any technical assistance that the UK should be providing?
I think absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of expertise, not just in mine action, but generally, that the UK could provide, yes.
Level of FCDO, or are you suggesting working through partners like HALO Trust and MAG?
And also the Geneva International Centre for Humanitarian Demining, the UN as well. I think all of those should be working together. But right now, it doesn't seem joined up.
So your assessment is that it's currently not there in terms of the level of that there's a gap between support needed and support being given.
Someone needs to first grip the issue and work out.
Where is that gap coming from? Is that from the Syrian government, or is that from the international community?
No. I think the Syrian government is building a government from scratch across all departments, and needs all the support it wants from supporting governments. I think.
Is that a role that a leadership role that FCDO could step into?
I personally think so. Yeah, I think otherwise the bodies that would otherwise do it, UN, Geneva Centre, NGOs, are a little bit too fragmented. I think someone or a group of donors. There is the Mine Action Support Group of international donors to Mine Action who could come together and provide some leadership on this issue.
That's useful to know. Final question. I'll put it to you now, Chair. It's just. I'm not sure I understand it as it's written here, but I think what we're asking you is sort of the degree to which the level of unexploded ordnance needs to be incorporated into humanitarian action in Syria. In terms of humanitarian programming, to what extent do actors need to take account of unexploded ordnance? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So if the FCDO is doing a agriculture project, does it take into account unexploded ordnances in commissioning that project?
Unfortunately, not always. What we know previously is that Yes, there were recently some discussion with FCGO during there were this development impact bond where they were linking mine action together with development, but that was like one of project we have seen in Syria previously. But yeah, I'm not sure the status of that at the moment. But what we know historically is that there used to be for mine action specifically, there used to be funding called GMAP, General Mine Action Program, funded for mine action activities. And unfortunately, what we have seen over the past year is that many countries in the Middle East region have not been part of GMAP, including Syria at the moment. And we would really like the UK government, the FCDO, to bring back, GMAP and bring back Syria into this funding. This is where the gaps are at the moment.
We will ask that question. Very much. Any more questions, members? Najat, Andrew, thank you so much for all that you do. But if you can also pass on our appreciation to all of your workers and volunteers around the world who are literally risking their lives so that others can have a livelihood. We really, really appreciate what you do. Thank you very, very much. Order. This session is now closed.